And 6 people were arrested for trespassing on the old state prison property in Cresson. Investigators say it happened yesterday around 4 p.m. The Cresson Township property is now privately owned, so when the current owner saw the suspects, that's when they called police. All 6 suspects were arrested and are facing trespassing charges.
I've explored this site on 3 separate occasions. The property owners agreed to allow me to document this place in its untouched condition. Sadly, the site today, 3 years later, looks like Disneyland, where so-called explorers can feel as if they made the discovery of a lifetime. The thing about this place is, it is the discovery of a lifetime for most people, including myself. I remember being on cloud 9 when I successfully drove away from the grounds with hours of footage. My only regret now is that I filmed such an amazing location without properly exposing its fascinating history. I noticed that after filming this place, I had many comments like, "How did you get in there?" or "Dude, will you take me up there with you?" Let's just say that it got to the point where I had to turn off the comments. The current owners are not exactly happy about all of the senseless trespassing and exploitation of the property. I feel a certain amount of responsibility for that. I have a soft spot for this location, not because I was one of the first to film it, not because I put in the work to make the right calls and film it properly, not because it was one of the largest complexes I've ever filmed, but because of what it represents and the historic changes it went through over the years, and the important people that were involved in it. To walk through these buildings and shakily film a crappy video while not knowing a thing about the place, just to look at it, I guess, is a disgrace. What is the point of filming a location knowing nothing or learning nothing about it? Today is going to get as in-depth as possible about what changes this place went through, including some of the things that went on here. My goal is to educate you, the viewer, and myself on the crazy history of these buildings. Most people make the trip up here and risk their freedom and walk onto this property and have no idea what they're even looking at. I feel a certain responsibility to change that. With all of that being said, though, I'm not knocking anyone who genuinely loves to explore abandoned places, because that would be extremely hypocritical. I walk onto properties sometimes knowing nothing about them, and then later kick myself when I learn how amazing the place really was. All I know is that I'd love to see this site preserved, like Penhurst or Hillview Manor, and the more it gets destroyed, the chances of that happening become too expensive, and it's almost impossible to keep up with. So, I want to give you guys an in-depth view of what this place was throughout the years and what an important role it played in Pennsylvania history. So let's get into the history. In 1900, there were 34 sanatoriums in the United States. By 1925, there were 536. The Cresson Sanatorium was one of the earlier sanatoriums and provides a record of life in an institution at a time of heightened health concerns and the spread of tuberculosis. The Cresson Sanatorium was located in the mountain near the present-day town of Cresson in Cambria County. The San, as it was known, was in existence from 1913 to 1964 and treated people diagnosed with tuberculosis. Some patients stayed for years, while others who died there were never reclaimed by their families and are interred in a nearby hillside. Beginning with the donation of the land by steel tycoon and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie and prescribed by the Act of Assembly in June 1910, the Cresson Tuberculosis Sanatorium was opened in 1916. The location was considered to be ideal due to the abundance of fresh air, and the treatments were used to combat the disease. The present administration building was built in the European style with gargoyles on the tower and the crests of the Scottish clans cut into the sandstone as a remember of Mr. Carnegie's heritage. With the introduction of new drugs and treatments for tuberculosis, the need for sanatoriums declined. In December of 1956, the facility was incorporated into the Lawrence F. Flick State Hospital, being run by the Department of Public Welfare to treat the mentally retarded. The facility remained in operation until December 1982. In 1983, the facility was converted into a state correctional institution under the Bureau of Corrections. Under Executive Order 1983-1, Governor Dick Thornburgh directed that the Bureau of Correction convert the facility into a state correctional institution. Total allocation for design and renovation was $20.6 million. First Lady Jenny Thornburgh, as an advocate of the mentally retarded, requested that the cemetery used by the facility since its inception be maintained as a memorial by the institution. Construction and renovation began in 1984. Many buildings were renovated with the addition of fire safety, environmental, and security equipment. Design for the new housing units for inmates became the prototype for institutions being built across the state. The director's home was moved from inside the future compound to a site on the road leading to the institution and became the superintendent's residence.
The story I wrote is about STI Cresson, and there are two parts of that particular investigation. One involves a suicide of a guy named John McClellan. The other involves mistreatment of a developmentally disabled prisoner named Tracy Petrovito.
Well, last December, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into allegations of prisoner abuse at Pennsylvania's state correctional institutions at Cresson and Pittsburgh. Now, there have been suicides, attempted suicides at the prisons, leading many to question the treatment of prisoners at these facilities. At Cresson specifically, the stories involve inmates who have been placed into solitary confinement. But solitary isn't just the norm in Pennsylvania, it's used all across the country. Some estimate that about 25,000 prisoners are living in solitary confinement. But then if you look to solitarywatch.com, they pointed out that the nationwide total is actually closer to 80,000 when you include not only supermax, but also state-run prisons like those in Pennsylvania. So what exactly are these prisoners being subjected to? And could this investigation pave the way for a change in our policies? I mean, let's talk about some of these really gruesome allegations, and you wrote about them in the way that one of these prisoners was treated. Give the details, please, if you don't mind, for our audience here.
The case with Tracy Petrovito is particularly unsettling. Again, he has an IQ of 70, and what happened with him, there's something called a secure special needs unit within this prison. That unit is specifically designed for people who have mental disabilities, but the most restrictive part of that unit is called Phase 5. And apparently, from allegations that I've received from people who work at the prison, who formerly work at the prison, as well as prisoners who were there and who are there now and who were formerly there, they were saying that he was placed into a cell alone 24 hours a day. His clothing was taken away from him, his property was taken away from him, and he was just left there to languish all day for months and months on end. A lot of this time was during the winter. There was a broken window in the cell, and supposedly the temperatures went down to below freezing during some of these days when he was confined, these months when he was confined in these circumstances. The grosser allegations that I've heard about involve, they would take away his clothing, they would turn off the water in his cell, they would refuse to give him toilet paper, and then he would use the bathroom, and then shortly thereafter they would feed him his food, and he would be forced to use the hand that he just wiped himself with to feed himself with. And so that's the type of allegation we're getting here, and that's supposedly why current and or former staff members at Cresson went forward to the Department of Justice to make these allegations and to bring about this investigation.
In closing, allow me to start by saying that I didn't intend to make this video so dark, but when it comes to hospitals or prisons that were full of death and torture, I really don't know any other way to produce it. I'm not out to lie about or sugarcoat such a tragic place, or else I'd work for public broadcasting. I do this to expose the reality and harshness of our Pennsylvania history, that, by the way, we have learned a lot from. It's important to learn from tragedy, to try to prevent it from repeating itself. All darkness aside, Dr. Lawrence Flick was a hero in the fight against tuberculosis and saved countless lives. His name and his work will be admired for years to come. When the property was converted into a mental hospital, they named it after him. Thank you for watching.
Prisons and jails are filled with inmates exhibiting symptoms of mental illness and in need of treatment. Many of the homeless people crowding the streets of cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York are mentally ill and in need of care. And violent episodes like the murder of Kendra Webdale have brought renewed calls to bring back one of America's most controversial institutions, the mental hospital, and to entrust the state with more authority to force psychiatric care on patients against their will.
Some psychiatrists and bioethicists have proposed bring back the psychiatric hospital.
You know, in the old days we had mental institutions, and you could nab somebody like this because, you know, they knew something was off.
The parents of mentally ill patients are among the most vocal advocates.
They shut down all the hospitals because, we have all these medicines now, and everybody can be in recovery. Well, the unfortunate fact is not everybody recovers. So where do they go? What do they do?
So is it time to bring back the asylum? And why did it disappear in the first place?
At the time that Zaz was writing, lots of people were locked up who posed no danger to other people and possibly not even dangerous to themselves in any way, and might be subjected to what today look like horrifying treatments, but at the time were considered to be the height of science.
Here the skull is thin enough to transmit light, and it can usually be perforated easily with a sharp instrument without damage to any important structures.
But the man who discovered lobotomy and got the Nobel Prize,
check it out, man. I mean, this merch is like really sick. Check me out, bro.